All right, so we're going to begin again today, and we're going to begin as we do with our prayer practice. Someone the other day, a dear friend, said to me, well, you say in the beginning, come into your own consciousness, your own awareness, your own presence. And it brought up into her soul the question, well, who am I? What is my presence? What is my consciousness? It's a very good question. Our exercise, our normal prayer starts with our own sense of our own self. And then with that rock, we then turn the rock into a cup. You have to do a little carving though, by the way. And the cup then receives the life of Christ Jesus into your heart for real. We're not just faking ourselves out here. This is not just a little child's exercise, even though we can become like children again. So what is yourself? Well, at the very minimum, or at the very maximum, just be content with your own attention. You're not your hunger. You're not actually your body. You're not your busy thoughts that are circling around in your mind. If you can just feel your awakeness and simply your empty attention, it's not easy. For all intents and purposes at this point, that's you. And you can turn that attention, that consciousness, to Him. Nobody can do that for you. Not even God will reach into your being and make you attend to Him. Darn. I wish you would just fix me. I wish you would just do it for me. Good. So let's begin now with this practice that we do. First, come into silence. Attentive silence. If things come up in your souls, thoughts, impulses, worries, whatever, recognize them and then turn your attention again to simply awareness. Then, with my words, we will turn in prayer to Him who walks in the Spirit before us. And we'll ask Him literally to fill our hearts, ourselves, our souls, our minds with His life. So, take a deep breath, turn slightly away from the screen, come into silence. And now turn your eye, your inner self, to Him. My heart be filled with your pure life, O Christ. My heart be filled with your pure life, O Christ. My heart be filled with your pure life, O Christ. Good. Slowly come back. So the more we practice this over the years, I hope the more you're beginning to see or feel or hear or know that the most important currency in this exercise, in this prayer, is earnestness. For real. That's why at Michaelmas time we hear from the altar, earnestness streams from his shining. Why Michael? Why earnestness? Because Michael is leading us to Christ. That's what he's, follow me, I lead you to Golgotha. To the gentleness of Christ. You want a living relationship with Christ? Follow Michael in earnestness. If you're not earnest, it ain't gonna happen. Last time we took up the challenge, the excitement, at least for me, of the purpose of the Christian community. This week I'm using blue. Everyone like my color choice here? Can you see that better? Okay, I don't know, maybe. All right, well, anyway, life goes on and then you die. Oh, I mean, that's what I usually tell my wife. She gets mad at me. Life goes on and then you die. She says I'm very melancholic, but I don't. Okay, one. We said last time, remember, we're going to go over these again because we just got to name them. Hopefully we get more than just naming them today. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. First one, sacramentalism. The Christian community, its purpose is sacramentalism. What is that? That's bringing the altar into everyday life. How do I make holy the world? How do I lift it from being desecrated to being holy? Yeah? This is extremely important. This has always been, by the way. Paul, the apostle, knew about sacramentalism. How do I bring the altar out into the world and make holy everything? But now there's more of an emphasis on it, not just for the holy saints to do it, but for every active ego to learn to do it. That's why we're called to co-participate with the priest at the altar. Why? Please turn off your phones. Because this isn't just for special people, this thing called Christianity, even though sometimes it seems like that. This is for a call for every human eye to make holy everything. The altar experience is, in a way, a training ground to bring out holiness into the whole of creation. Sacramentalism. 2. We'll come back to that. I'm just going to list them. Oh, I said that last time, didn't I? Jeez. The living word. I'm going to list them because I had to erase it. So I'm just going to list them now. Prayer. Oh, here. Everything okay?
Yes, that happens sometimes. I'm disturbing. So.
Community building around the altar. Inner freedom, number 5. And countering. Wasn't this my favorite? One of my favorites. Countering our true I. Hopefully you can read this better now. I don't know. And last but not least, healing the sickness of sin. Oh, yeah. So let's go. Sacramentalism. One of the best lectures that I heard at the recent conference in Dornach for all the priests was from a dear colleague called Georg Schar, and he's also a seminary director in Stuttgart. And Georg gave a talk that also touched in on this task that we have, this new quality of this task, which is to create like I said, create holiness in our reality, not just to depend, if that's even possible, on God to do everything, which we often find that mood in certain expressions of religious life. God does everything. We're called actually to become co-creators. Don't you know you are gods, says Jesus? Doesn't mean you're God. That's the New Age distortion of it. But you're called to be co-creators with me and the Trinity. So one expression of that Steiner describes, that Gerhard Schar brought up in his talk, is something called the principle of creatio ex nihilo. Creatio ex nihilo, or creation out of nothing. Creation out of nothing is a metaphysical, philosophical concept talked about most strongly probably by Philo, who was a kind of philosopher also connected to the Jewish tradition and the Christian tradition. But creatio ex nihilo has to do with, as Steiner describes it, the human eye, the one that says yes or no in you and you and you, deciding to see something new in what is given. So Georg describes it like this. He was working in a hospital, and this anthroposophical hospital was there for all kinds of ailments. And at one point, this woman was brought into the hospital and given a room and given a bed. And she was extremely difficult, very problematic. And she would just flip personalities. She would go into rages. Nobody knew, all the nurses, all the doctors, everyone had a very difficult time with this person. And at one point, then they all had a meeting around this, what to do about this difficult individual. And this one doctor, and Georg was there, this one doctor said at one point, when everything seemed to be unsolvable, perhaps this person is here for us to learn how to be in relationship with each other in a new way. Perhaps this person is here to challenge us to learn how to relate to one another in this hospital, doctors, nurses, priests, in a new way. What if she is calling us to form new capacities that we did not have refined before, and the room changed? You ever experience that, when the room changes, when someone says something that's of the Spirit? So, what is that? That's sacramentalism. Why? That's creation out of nothing. Why? Because the human eye and the human eye of this doctor that said those words brought down a new way of seeing, a new perceptive moral lens that totally changed how they were relating to this person and how the whole community in the hospital was working. Just by seeing with moral eyes in a new way. Who did that? This doctor. By shifting the way they were seeing something that had been a total burden. Everyone was fed up with this person. And he out of his eye capacity to see in a new way, shifted the whole scene, made the suffering holy. Why? Because now it was aligned to the task of creating new relationships with one another. You see how that is? That comes out of a seeing, a turning, a metanoia, transformation of heart and mind. Wait a minute, what's the doorway to the kingdom of God? Repent. Metanoia. The kingdom of God is at hand. You see that formula? Viktor Frankl also wrote a book about this capacity, by the way. Man's Search for Meaning. That's creation out of nothing. That's the idea. It's not just an idea, it's a capacity that can only be a capacity of an eye. You see that? What's the greatest enemy to this capacity for seeing the holiness even in the darkness? Blame. Blame. It's this lady's fault for being the devil in our midst. Blame is the ultimate enemy of sacramentalism. It's this government's fault for making our lives terrible. It's this priest's fault for leading us in a terrible way. That's never going to be holy. You're only going to feel self-righteous, which is a nice little hit of dopamine, I have to admit. You get a little like, yeah, I'm good because they're bad. I'm good because that Bezos, he's a real greedy mofo. Bezos, Amazon's boss, by the way. You get a little hit of dopamine when you're self-righteous, thinking you're the one that with all the goods and they're the ones with all the bads. But it's not holy. It's just egotism. It just makes your noose heavier. The stone around your neck heavier. It's true. So creation out of nothing, how does that occur? That means at any moment, my work is to say, okay, Lord, how can I see this in a way that can bring sacredness to whatever arises? And if it's difficult, how does that difficulty serve the capacity forming of patience, forgiveness, love, bearing, holiness, the sword of truth, whatever it is? Only an eye can do that. And it's not given. That's why it's creation out of nothing. It's not actually something you can't rest on it in that way. You have to continually be willing to create it. Now you say, okay, well, do I create it totally on my own? No, that's where the principle falls down. I'm also asking for help to see. Lord, help me see with your eyes. Creation out of nothing actually really only applies to nothing is only no physical material things are going to help me with this. only spiritual beings. Another picture that's connected to this task of sacramentalism. This is, again, these are principles, capacities Steiner lays down in the very first priest lectures. This is what it's going to be about. This is what your priests need to be able to do. This is what you are going to have to help congregations learn. One of the things he says is, the world has ended. The world has ended. Actually, with Caesar. Heaven and earth will fall away. My word will remain. This is from the gospel. So again, how do we live in a world that is actually decaying, crumbling, in the possession of Ahriman, and in the midst of that, co-create out of nothing goodness, forgiveness, healing, blessedness. Not that fixes everything necessarily, but that shines out like a light in the darkness. And that preserves goodness as the new seed for the new world. You are the salt of the earth. You're preserving the seed of what will become the new earth through your creative capacities, through co-collaborating with Christ. You are the light of the world, inasmuch as you're able to light up with his joy, his life, his righteousness. Not self-righteousness, by the way. Okay, next one. The living word. So sacramentalism is, how can I take actually what is the substance of creative power that actually bears the signature of transubstantiation, because I'm taking what material reality gives me, and I'm trying to, out of creative forces, make it holy. That's what happens at the altar. I'm trying to take that into the world. Now we see the living word. This has to do with how do we take what is intellectual and redeem it into what is imaginal. One of the reasons why this is new, and this is a new task that is also related to the Christian community, also anthroposophy, is that we have all, every human being is now totally influenced by materialistic intellectualism. That was not the case when the Catholic Mass was founded. Was that not the case? Hardly anybody ever even was educated back in the day. But since the dawn of intellectualism, since, for example, the fact that the Bible is now able to be in everyone's hands and we can study it and dissect it, there has to be a medicine for the danger of intellectualism. What's the danger of intellectualism? You kill revelation. You kill revelation. You dissect it to death. You analyze it to death, and it becomes dead. Have you ever had that experience? Yeah. Right? That's why, that's part of the reason why I couldn't stand school. Because I know now, because I experienced the death in the intellect so strongly. It just was like, I'm a memorizing machine, spitting out facts. Oh God, please have mercy. And yet, the intellect is so important, is it not? To be clear, to really see the difference between things. We owe so much to the intellect, but it's a problem. And the Catholic Church knew that. Steiner describes this very, very succinctly in his Herps course, 30 lectures to the priests. Catholic Church knew the danger that was coming. The intellect was burgeoning. Everyone was getting to know science. Science was taking over. So they said, what? What did they do? Catholic Church said, okay, there's a difference between faith and knowledge. See, I don't even have to explain that to you because everyone knows that now. But that was actually a new thing back in the day. The Catholic Church did that. There's a difference between faith and knowledge. You can have knowledge, but all that scientific, intellectual knowledge doesn't touch faith and revelation. It has nothing to do with it. If you want faith and revelation, you believe the priest and the institution and the sacrament. If you want knowledge, okay, you go study that. But they're separate. You even had priests, many priests. In fact, the Jesuit tradition is to be incredibly well-versed intellectually, but know the difference between faith and knowledge. You can know things, but that doesn't touch faith. Faith is protected from the intellect. Why did the Catholic Church want to do that? Because of the death forces in the intellect that you all know about. They did not want those death forces to kill the deep revelations that were coming through in the sacrament and out of God. So dogma is the result. Listen to this. Dogma is a protection. Dogma was a good thing to protect the life of revelation from the death forces of the intellect. Are you following me, I hope? Now, what's the dark side of dogma? If originally it was a protection, you can't question. The priest has the knowledge and the power and the revelation, and you can't know for yourself. Faith is something devoid of knowledge. Does that sound familiar? It's very important that you're following these thoughts with me. This is the evolution of the relationship of faith and knowledge. The Catholic Mass was then brought down in a time when there was none of this problem of faith and knowledge. So Rudolf Steiner saw very clearly there has to be a new expression of Christian life that doesn't divorce knowledge from faith. Otherwise, as a body of the Christian community, we will never be able to bring together knowledge and faith. Which we know if we read the book of Revelation that there is a being who is both moral and the knower. 19, Revelations 19, the one who is both true, truthful, and good, brings morality and knowledge together. There was a reason to protect. Revelation needed to be protected by the intellect because the intellect had to take its seed and root in the human being so that we could be free. You're free in the intellect, meaning independent. an intellectual thought does not impel you in any way. It's dry, it's neutral. Very important for freedom. You can dissect it clearly, and it doesn't. You see, if an angel brings you a thought, that's not neutral. Did you know that angels are meant to be messengers of thinking? You see, Mary couldn't just be like, to Gabriel, well, I could go this way or that way. She was confronted. It was an encounter. She was deeply moved and had to work with it. The human evolution had to go through the bathtub phase of total independence in the realm of thinking. But we don't want to stay there. We need a form of Christian spirituality that can bring together. So that's why one of the most important pictures of and realities that the Christian community is tasked with, which is not divorced from anthroposophy, but is also mainly tasked in the Christian community, is the picture of faith, not as blind belief. Faith is a living power that can bring me gradually to a knowledge experience. It's like a magnet. That's how Steiner describes faith. It's a power that gradually brings my soul to knowing.
But you first know a bit before you.
I would think that you first know a bit, says Karen, before. Yes, that's the whole point. For example, a scientist who does not believe that truth is possible will never embark on the journey of scientific inquiry. Has to be rooted in that truth is knowable. There's something I can find that's more true. I don't believe any of you would be here if you didn't have somewhere in you a sense Christ is real. And now I'm going to, that deep feeling, which is actually faith, is going to be like a power that gradually attracts me to that unfolding of knowledge more and more. See how different that idea of faith is? It's like a seed that gradually unfolds into a tree. Faith is like a mustard seed. A power that magnetizes me closer and closer to a knowledge experience, as opposed to something that is completely separate from knowledge and has to be believed blindly. Very good. The other aspect of this living word, so it's not just something that you have to believe, it's something you can begin to live with and know through your own experience. Another aspect of this that's tasked is that we don't give sermons, for example, just like intellectual dissectings of gospels. We try to bring in imagination. Imagination that weaves in deep thinking. So, for example, if we look outside, we see these incredible trees, right? I mean, right now, at least in our area, the trees are on fire. Beautiful golds and yeah. What is the human eye? Human eye. Is it not on fire? Are you not being called right now in some small or great way to burn away something that you're wearing? Are those red leaves on the trees not pictures of flames burning away, and that will soon, we know, those leaves will fall away? And then what kind of clothing will the tree put on after the leaves fall away? Live into the picture, friends. Don't get distracted.
Snow.
Snow and light. Well, first light. Snow is a temporary. Light. The tree puts on a garment of light. Is that not true? Don't get into your intellect. Get into the picture. Use your mind in the picture. The human eye is a tree. It's burning. It's being called to let go of our old clothing and put on the garment of light that rays forth from it, from Golgotha, for it. You with me? You see what just happened? We experience the living word. Why is that living? Because it's full of image, true image, that's not devoid of thinking. And what else does it do? It doesn't just leave you. Unless you ignore it, it leaves you. You can start to feel it in your heart. You see? The Christian community is tasked to go from the intellect, which we're all baptized in. We are total intellectual materialists, period. If you think you're not, you're not seeing clearly. And we're called not to remain that, but to lift thinking into the imaginative, life-filled, Christed world. By the way, that's called the gospel. That's also how you should teach, says a lifelong teacher. Amen. You see, this is not just the task of the Christian community, but it's also the task of the Christian community to bring. And why do we bring that? So that we can overcome what had to be done, this separation of faith and knowledge, that we can overcome, but in freedom, find a new way of living with faith and knowledge. In a way, you could say this also helps us see the role of thinking itself. Just there, we experience together a little bit of living thinking. That's living thinking, where it's imbued with image that moves your heart. That's also true. It's not false. Intellectual thinking is just like facts and memory and dissecting that stays outside and is in information. Also important, but we can't remain there. Yeah.
Doesn't do us anything. Doesn't help us in any way.
Right? Well, the intellect helps us in many ways, right? But it doesn't necessarily help you with your heart and with its relationship to Christ Jesus. That's why you can have incredible professors at universities, outstanding, the most brilliant minds, and their heart is a shambles. Their relationships are worse than mediocre. Because knowledge can be here only. It doesn't have to become wisdom. And it doesn't have to become love. Okay, next. Oh. We need like 3 hours every Wednesday. Okay, prayer. Oh, my favorite subject. This one is actually my favorite. All right, so friends, the Christian community, this sounds like a duh. The Christian community's task is prayer. But that's always been, has it not? And yet, Rudolf Steiner, in the beginning of the Herbst Course, 30 Lectures to the Priest, says, unless prayer is re-enlivened to not something that's just a list of wants from your lower self, from a kind of bartering, if you, I will, unless it becomes a doorway to an objective reality where I feel I'm touching in my prayer, I'm touching in on reality. Unless it becomes that, the religious renewal movement is nothing, will be nothing. Most people don't even pray today, let alone say, oh, I can feel an objective reality. Even people in other churches don't pray, friends. So if you're feeling, oh my gosh, I don't know if I pray ever, you're not alone. That's okay. Nevertheless, it is the task gradually to come into a new relationship. Similarly, how we had to fall into intellectualism, we had to fall into a place of aloneness, or where prayer has become childish and kind of ridiculous, where I'm just asking for selfish things, which nobody feels like is good. No one, actually. So how do we work with this prayer then? We're called to be shepherds of souls as priests. We're called to help humans learn to pray. Well, if I'm a priest and I don't pray, how's that going to go? That's not a good thing. But I can't just pray like old style. That's also not a good thing, because everyone knows asking for things is not cool. Hold on. If I'm a shepherd of souls, but everyone knows there's a good shepherd, what am I doing? Am I taking over his job?
Maybe I pray for others.
Maybe I pray for others. How do I do that? What is the dynamics of prayer? What am I praying for? Do I pray for someone to get a new house?
The sun and the moon. You get the sun and then you reflect it, the moon.
Get the sun and reflect at the moon, right? Or not to be ill. Maybe that person needs the illness for a deep karmic dynamic that they're going through. If I pray to get rid of it, that's not a service to their higher being. And yet, do I just let everyone suffer? Who cares? That's for your good. Oof.
Only if
you pray for his guidance.
Yeah.
Yes, that also, exactly. Now, you see, we do know some of this stuff. So the first thing is, how do I begin? If I can't pray myself, I'm not going to be able to guide others. They're going to feel the hypocrisy in my being. It's the same with priests. If I'm not able to follow and be guided by the good shepherd, I'm not going to know how to shepherd others. That means, what does that mean? I have to become a sheep. Oh, no. A priest has to be a sheep. Oh, no. Terrible. Oh, I can just, Karen is not happy with that. No. Yes. If there's a good shepherd and you want to help other people follow the good shepherd, that means you need to know what it means to be a sheep. Uh-oh. Now we come into a problem. Nobody wants to be a sheeple. Who wants to be a sheeple? Nobody. This is the problem with what that connotation and that whole dynamic has become in our time. But if you read the Gospel of John carefully, and you come to the place where the Good Shepherd is revealed, and you see how the sheep is described, you see something very different than a sheeple. Go back and read it, John 10. The sheep is the one who is able to hear the good shepherd calling me by my true name. It's a Mary gesture. You listening?
Yes, but
I'm calling you by your true name.
don't know much.
Can you hear it? That's the sheep in you. Do you listen, or do you turn your inner receptivity off and do whatever you want as the goat? Doesn't stop there. It says the sheep is the one that can discern the voice of the good shepherd from the fraud. If anyone is a class member, and if anyone has ever meditated on the 14th lesson, that's sheep training. Ooh, that confronts your pride a bit. Because the two frauds' voices are revealed there in counter-distinction to the Good Shepherd. Our eye is meant to learn to discern the voice of the Good Shepherd, the voice of Christ Jesus, calling you in your heart from the fraud, Ahriman and Lucifer, who speak a similar language, friends. To become a Christian means to develop an inner relationship to Jesus Christ. June course, Rudolf Steiner. And this is a discerning process. It's a knowledge process. It's a Sophia process. Then, when I can gradually learn, I can also gradually pray to receive his life. In our act of consecration of man, it says in our communion, you want to commune with Christ? Well, what is he doing? He's standing at peace with the world. The world is burning, it's broken, it's beautiful, it's suffering. But he is standing at peace with the world, bearing and ordering. And it says then, he's offering us this peace. You can have this peace because I give it to you. Very simple. So how are you going to receive it? Prayer. Lord, this conversation I had with this person is so difficult for me this morning. Help me to know what is true. Help me to stand at peace with the pain of it niggling on me now, today. Help me to walk with it until it reveals what is truly good. What's there for me? What's there for me to simply carry and bear? Help me to be at peace. Another really important part of prayer is connected to our sacraments. Most notably, what I just said, the sacrament of the act of consecration. In communion, we're called to be in a prayer relationship if we want the peace that is being offered. It says, therefore, O Christ, it's a prayer, make strong that in me which must wrest itself free from the load of sin, and in thinking and willing join with you that it stand at peace with the world. That's a new form of prayer. I must do two things there, at least. First, I must wrest myself free from the load of sin. Nobody can do that except you. You're praying, though, for strength to do that. Make strong that in me which must wrest itself free from the load of sin. In the context of the example I just gave, if I had a difficult conversation in the morning, what would the sin be? My tendency to blame them? Or inability to listen, or my rage at them, or my wanting to leave, to go escape and never talk to them again? I don't know. Lots of things arise in our being as sin. Give me the strength, Lord, the first prayer, to wrest myself free from that will, those temptations. And then, that's not it. Give me the strength to join with you and receive the peace that you're offering. That's an I activity. No one can do those things but you. Myself lies lamenting on the ground, passion time. Raise it. You see, the whole epistle life in the Christian community is a schooling of the I in prayer. Raise it. Help me. I feel totally powerless and broken. Raise me. Did you know Rudolf Steiner said that it's not the job of the human spirit, the human I, to perfect itself? This is from yesterday's distance learning program. This is Christianity as Mystical Fact 101, which hardly anyone reads, by the way. It's not the task of the I to raise itself and perfect itself spiritually. Your divinity has been removed from you and now lives in Jesus. And he is here with you to lift you up. Rudolf Steiner. Read it for yourself. That's what we do in the Passiontide epistle. Myself lies lamenting on the ground. Raise it. Raise me. Help me. This is prayer. We don't produce the peace. We don't produce the love. We receive it. Why do you think in the sacrament that's called the sacrament for the I, the sacrament of consultation, what happens there? For those of you who are familiar with it. The words are learn. Learn something. First, very first. Amazing. Total revolution in the history of the Beichte, history of the confession. Learn, develop, evolve. Learn what? How to perfect yourself through spiritual exercises? No. Learn to offer yourself. Offer your thoughts. Ask, Lord. And then to receive your will through the grace of God. Does that sound familiar? Raise it. Jesus has come to lift us with his might, if we would but receive it. Learn to receive your will. When is the last time you felt you received your will from God? That's a capacity to learn. That's a Sophia work. Then your soul will feel peace. Oh, peace is not something I produce out of my own self. It comes from receiving, offering, actively offering, and then receiving. To feel bestowed upon, to feel helped, to feel graced brings peace. Not peace that everything is okay, but peace. And then the astounding thing, and we're going to come to a close here. We can only explain through 3. That's okay. We've got time.
Is it the peace of contentment?
Is it the peace of contentment? Karin asked really quickly. No, it's not the peace of contentment, because Who's content? I don't know anyone. It's not the peace of everything is fine. It's not the peace that we're actually, part of us is looking for, that I can just sit on my couch and eat potato chips and I don't have to worry about anything. No, this peace is what happens when you're at the altar and your face is touched. And if your heart is open, you feel an influx of strength, love, grace, a kind of strange joy that can also bear suffering. It's a gift. And then we hear later also, once I start to, then your soul will feel peace. You will then find love for God. You don't produce love for God, it finds you. Then you will love humans. That's the final culmination of real prayer. This is the archetypal consciousness soul structure of real prayer. You don't produce love. You're actually not able to on your own. Even in the act of consecration, it says, in the offering, be born the fire of love, because I'm offering in Christ. You see, you are not a loving person. I am not a loving person. If we had everything, we would not need to pray. Extremely important. I cannot underline that enough. And yet, if I do nothing, I won't be able to unite with the river that is love for God and love for humans. You see, the Christian picture of loving yourself, being compassionate for yourself, is very different than the modern conception that, oh, I just have to be loving to myself. I just have to love myself. Well, that's egotism, by the way. That's egotism. Unless you're feeling bestowed upon by the love that God has for you. Then you can find love born in your soul. Then you can start to love human beings for real. You see, in the Christian community, we also have the task of understanding where and what love is. Because the highest commandment is to love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind. But that love for God is something that has to be born in us. It's something that comes about through active eye-level prayer. And it's a gift. Oh, okay. Next time we'll go through 4 and 5 and 6 and 7. We're building up the new task of the Christian community, also to form a foundation for what we'll look at when we go into the act of consecration's 4 steps. All right, friends, let's open it up to questions and comments. Elizabeth has her hand up here already. And I'll keep an eye out for the internet folk as well. Okay, Elizabeth, question.
Can you speak a little bit about the healing of the soul? We hear that in the act of consecration.
The healing of the soul.
That the soul may live.
Like in the communion.
Yeah.
Like
I don't remember where it is, but it's
the body of Christ, heal my soul,
yeah.
that it continue to live. So the question is, can I say something a little bit about the healing of the soul? Isn't that interesting? That in the gospel, in the act of consecration, it says The body of Christ, heal my soul that it continue to live. The blood of Christ, enliven. What are the words again? It's always hard for me to remember. Anyway, enliven my soul that it die not. Yeah? That in the time to come it die not. Right? In that sense, you could say that the old picture that we're re-enlivening in a more detailed, conscious way is salvation of the soul is real. The soul needs saving. From what? Well, if we look at what we talked about a little bit, well, we live in a world of desecration. We live in a world that is not guaranteed holy. The soul that can co-create holiness begins to be in the realm of salvation. The soul is often understood in our communities merely as the astral body. That's not what it means here. And very often Steiner means something much fuller. Thinking, feeling, willing, but also the lower ego is often named or encapsulated in the soul because it's so bound up with the soul, even though it's also your ego. Why is that? Because, for example, oftentimes when I'm really have a strong thought or have a strong feeling or have a strong impulse, I identify myself with that. I defend it. I'll get in a fight with you over that thought. That means your lower ego has united itself with that. So very often we have the soul is a name for your thinking, feeling, willing, and your lower ego combined. So we're praying there that your thinking, feeling, willing, and your lower self, your lower ego that can be egotistical, die not go the way of matter, not go the way of selfishness. The healing of the soul, for example, means to learn to pray. Have you ever felt in your soul when you've really struggled and offered your thoughts to the divine and something new that felt like grace came into your soul? Have you ever felt liberated? Like, even if it doesn't last forever, you feel like I'm a little freer now. And I have a little more peace. And then I can love a little more. That's the soul being saved.
It's liberating.
Soul being healed.
That it can be healed. It's liberating to think that the soul can be healed.
Already, Elizabeth says that it's even possible that the soul can be healed is already helpful. Amen. The healing of the soul is also the salvation of the soul. This is what it's all about. It's also about, by the way, the healing of the ego. So often we're belasted, burdened by the thought that our ego is perfect. This is old Vedantic, old mystery thinking, infiltrating our new mysteries. The ego is perfect, and all I have to do is make everything my ego. No, ego needs healing. And that happens through the relationship with Christ Jesus. For real. The lower ego. Yeah. My true ego is actually in him. It's not in me. Very, very challenging. Yeah. It flips all of we actually still have to break out of the old mysteries. We're still very much influenced by them. So that the soul can be healed, this is what it's all about. Communion is about the healing of the soul. Remember the 3 laws of communion? And then we'll go on to Susan. Communion is learning to receive peace, like we talked about. Praying for the strength to wrest myself free from the load of sin and receiving peace. Being in a peace dynamic with Christ as I walk in my life. That's soul healing. Another principle of communion is a sick dwelling, a whole soul. Living in a sick dwelling. Does anybody live in a sick dwelling here? I do. Sick body, sick world, broken world, whole soul. That connects, remember, to this inner freedom principle we'll get to. Cultivating peace, love, joy, trust in a broken reality. Communion with Jesus. Whole soul, healing soul, salvation. And finally, connected to the wine. I confess unto that which is revealed through you, and the might of the adversary you take from me. The might of the adversary is temptations like jealousy, envy, thoughts that seem good but are not. When I learn more and more about Jesus Christ and can actually confess to his reality, recognize his reality, the might of the adversary is lifted. That's soul healing. That's salvation. But the adversary doesn't go away. That's why you have the group statue. By the way, that picture of wrath I showed you last time that blew everyone out of the water, that's also the picture of the group statue. What do you think being so close to the adversaries is all the time? The group statue is a picture of God standing squished, but regal, between the adversaries. Constantly. Is that not a flame of fire? In the picture I showed of the wrath of God sitting at the top of the Gertianum, the highest expression of God, that his face is a flame, is a consuming fire, it's also, the adversaries are there. Look closely. It's just another deeper octave of the group statue. Why? Why? Because you don't know the Father unless you see the Son. The way to see the Father is through Golgotha. It's through Christ. Did you know that we cannot find Christ without also finding the adversary? That's why the group statue is made in such a way that it is, and why it stands at the center of the Gertianum, at least the first one. It's literally telling you Christ is revealed with the adversary. You see what that does for our desire to just be with only goodness, to be clean and free of all the problems? No, that's not where Christ's at. He's with us in the adversary's realm. Once in a while, Irene says, okay, then we're going to get to Susan. Irene says, once in a while we say, give me a break. Once in a while. Mercy, Lord, mercy, constantly. Yeah.
This concept of the Father and I are one, the Father, isn't it?
Exactly.
And yet they're so admired concept. It's so different. I can't bring them together.
I just did for you. Just think about what I just said for a little while. Let go of your old idea. Think about the pictures, the group statue plus the flaming face. Those are the same. So I got to go on. I see you. You're next, but first is Susan from Chicago. Susan, did you have a question?
I wasn't sure if I was. This is a kind of a different thing. Maybe it kind of blends in. But last week, I think, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, you talked about the Earth being encompassed by this electrical field now.
Yeah.
That we're almost, and those were adversarial, and that we are not able to access what we used to be able to access. And then you today talked about this tree and thinking ahead to the next season when you have the tree and then the snow and then the light. Because what we have to do is get underneath or around the electrical field, and that sounds like it was imaginative. So is that what you're kind of heading towards? Like why the imagination, or why Steiner talked about imagination?
Well, interesting question. Okay, so I'll try to answer it. First of all, the picture of the imagination of the tree is the imagination of the self. That we're trying to burn something away, let go of something to receive the light of God as a clothing. That's what the tree is doing right now. That can be translated into our experience like, okay, what do I need to let go of? How can I find the strength to wrest myself free from the load of sin? And in thinking and willing, receive God's peace, God's light, that it refreshes my being so that I can shine in the darkness. The principle that you brought up, Susan, here, this inner freedom, Steiner doesn't talk about going around or going by or getting rid of.
Right. Mr. Goethe, yeah.
No, not Goethe.
Well, I thought after him, we could not access what he used to be able to with his imaginative exercises.
Oh, no, I didn't say that.
No, not you, but I thought that was around that time where we couldn't access what we used to with imagination.
Yes, so okay, well, let me just say what I was trying to speak there. The fact of the electrical reality, all the wires, the internet, the electrical, is such a burden on human beings right now. Rudolf Steiner describes us as conduits, yeah, that it's draining us of perhaps the forces also to think creatively and imaginatively. Yeah? The question becomes, we can't get rid of that reality. We're not meant to, he says. We're not meant to get rid of 5G, by the way. We're meant to find a way to find a fountain that refreshes our inner being and helps us find inner freedom so that we can bear what we can't be free from. I'm going to repeat that again. Our task with the act of consecration, with the life, is to find a fountain, for example, in prayer or in the act of consecration, or even in something like this, where you feel inwardly enlivened and refreshed, so that you can bear what we must bear. And your soul doesn't die. Friends, I mean, I laugh. It's not funny. We're at risk of our soul dying. This is no joke. But it's not your task to get rid of it. It's your task to strengthen what remains. To learn to find out of your own eye, the fountain of life that can help you bear the karma of humanity without losing love. An inner sense of what's truly good. You see that it's not an either or. In our polemic time, we want to go to either or really quickly. It's an inner aliveness. So inasmuch as I've seen so many of you at communion be touched by the life of Christ, I've seen it. I'm not going to forget it. Sorry if that's too confronting. That moment, that substance That's the inner freedom, inner nourishment that I need to fill up on often so that I can bear what I can't be free from. Not meant to be free from it. In fact, the pictures, the esoteric pictures say it's going to get harder than it is now. I mean, it's hard to imagine, but it's true. So that means you need to be better at learning to know how to get the fountain. And the sacraments have to be designed to deal with that kind of reality. Catholic Church, Catholic Mass, all other sacraments were not brought down at that time for those purposes. When your cup is empty, where do you go to fill it up? YouTube? It's not impossible to find the Spirit on YouTube, especially when Living Christ will be launched on YouTube. But friends, you get my drift, right? You can find the Spirit at the mall, but don't fool yourself with shopping therapy. You'll know, because in a few days you'll feel empty, even more empty than you were before. But what if you meet someone totally interesting at the mall, and the conversation that you engage in enlivens your soul for a moment? You feel more human for a moment. You remember for a moment. You can take another step for a moment. You see, that's sacramentalism. How do I learn to offer my thoughts to the divine and to receive my will through the grace of God? Good. Okay. You have to stop me sometimes. Next question. Galina, and then I see Michael. So Galina and then Michael. I think that would be. Yeah, Galina.
I have a difficulties to follow Michael. He's called follow me. I will bring you to the gift of Golgotha. For me, Archangel Michael, it is just some of abstract knowledge from Steiner, and doesn't matter how I try, specifically in October, to live this, to enliven even the enlightened disease, some of information. I can't do it.
Yeah. Good. Thank you, Galina. So Galina says, for those of you on the internet, thank you, priest, for telling me this. But every time I try to follow Michael, it says in our liturgy that Michael is saying, follow me, I lead you to Golgotha, to really understand in a new and enlivened way Golgotha. She says, I try with the information that I receive from anthroposophy, from Steiner, but it remains abstract intellectual information for me, and I can't find a way for that to enliven me. I don't think you're alone, Galina. I don't think you're alone. I think this is a challenge. Again, this relates to the task of the living word that also includes the anthroposophical community of how do we go from the intellect to the living life of knowledge? It's not easy. You may feel, I don't know if I can do it, like Galina. I don't know if I've ever done it. It remains sticks, dry sticks. That's what Thomas Aquinas said at his deathbed. He said, oh, all those books I wrote, You know, the whole opus of almost all Western intellectual life, Thomas Aquinas. Oh, it just sticks compared to my experiences of Jesus. So, you know, Galina and dear friends who have also had maybe that experience, that they've struggled with the intellectuality of anthroposophy to bring it into a living fountain. Lamenting is okay. There's a whole book on it in the Bible. It's called Lamentations. Complaining isn't as helpful, even though it's possible to. But lamenting, why is lamenting different than complaining? My wife says I complain in the morning early before my coffee. True, often. Why is this here? Why is that there? You see, because all of those complaints have to do with my personal comfort. That's complaining. Lamenting is, Lord, how long? Lord, what is the meaning of this in my destiny? Lord, how long must we bear this terrible suffering of constant war and overwhelming confusion in the world? You see the difference? I can also be, Lord, how long must I bear my own weaknesses? It can have to do with me, but it's always, lamenting is always addressed to God. It's a prayer. Lamentations. So I'm beyond what I've only said today. I'm not going to go into answering that for you. I don't know that that would be appropriate. But I want to acknowledge it and to say there are many souls who are feeling that way. And it's a challenge for us. How do we move from mere intellect to living life? Not getting rid of the intellect, but transforming it into living life. That's the challenge. Yes, lots of things can help. Good. Thank you for offering that, because I think a lot of people can relate to that. Nevertheless, Michael is the being of thinking for us. And he's asking us, he's calling us, even being here, friends, all of you who are here, sitting here, is following Michael. I'm not trying to because why? Because we're trying to work with thinking in such a way that it opens up a place where we can feel nourished by its life. One more from Michael, and then we'll have to close. Michael?
Yes, Jonah. At times I've heard you speak of a kind of archetypal surrender where people, someone just is overwhelmed by their experience at the time. They have so many challenges, they just kind of surrender. And at that point, there's kind of a profound transformation that can be permanent. But I was thinking about a Zen priest that I know. I was going for a few times a month for about 3 years to these Qigong classes that he gave. And at the end of the class, for about 15 minutes, he would give a little Zen talk. Anyway, one time in conversation, he said, I had someone come to me and they were just at the end of the rope. They had no idea what to do. And I didn't know what to say to them. And I told them, I'll show you how to do prostrations. Just do prostrations, and eventually the weight of the ego will lift and you'll feel inwardly free. Anyway, please comment on that.
Wonderful. Okay, I think everyone heard that, right? So, dear friends, we have... Bless you. Jesus is the universal human, the representative of humanity. This is Steiner's names for him. It's not relegated to special people. Jesus is working in every single human being, period. And that's why we hear at the Michaelmas time, Michael is not only leading us to Golgotha as an encounter with Christ Jesus in his etheric reality. We hear in the second liturgy, second epistle, Christ is working in the depth of your soul. Period. And it doesn't say Christ is working in the depth of your soul except for Zen priests, except for practitioners of Qigong. No. Christ, Jesus, the universal human, is universal. And it goes on. It says Christ is not making you into a believer in the liturgy. Sending his power and impulse into your heart. The Christ impulse lives in every human being as an impulse. Whether I say, oh, that's Christ's impulse or not. For example, Malala, she stood up to the Taliban for women's education with incredible courage, ready to sacrifice her life for freedom. That's a Christ impulse sent into her heart by Christ Jesus, who lives in the depth of her soul.
Is it possible to
So, what a Zen priest can also hear the call, maybe call it different names, but the impulse, if we learn to recognize the signature of Christ's activity, we don't have to rely on mere labels. We can see the archetypes. So to practice surrendering so that the the lower ego can receive something new, that's a Christ impulse. However, Christ is not only speaking into our hearts, Lucifer and Ahriman are speaking into our hearts. So that means that we're also susceptible, even you all who come to the act of consecration. Right? So you see, this is a universalism. This is not a mere sect. This is a call for human beings to learn to know the voice of the true human being that is now died into them. How do we learn this language? It's going to take a long time. So that's a really great question. Christ is in you, not you. Too often we think, oh, my conscious self is Christ. Wrong. My conscious self can know Christ working in me, receive Christ thinking in me as death, resurrection, revelation, and begin more and more to identify myself. The more I identify my lower self with Christ in me, working in me, the more I can start to see Christ working in Beth and Karen and Irene. And then what do I do if I've identified myself with that being? Then all of a sudden, what's in you is me. How much do I love Christ is how much I love you. See how that works. Dear friends, we have to end. We'll say the Lord's Prayer, and I know there were some more questions, but save them for next time. Our Father in the heavens, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, as above in the heavens, so also on the earth. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil. For yours is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Thank you, friends. Look forward to next week.